Well, hello and welcome. You are now listening and perhaps watching the Spark Your Creative podcast. And I am your host, Sharon Burton, with Spark Your Creative Coaching. And I am pleased to give you another edition of our special series focusing on being creative after 40. And I am been really delighted with the guests I've been able to get to share their stories with you. And they are unique and different because we know that you are unique and everyone has a different story coming into their creative life. And I didn't really want to focus on celebrities and big time folks like that because we all know their story, right? I think what's really important for me is that you, as the listener or the watcher, that no matter what your background, no matter how you came into your creative life or what you are bringing into launching a creative life, you have a place and your creativity matters. And so hopefully this series is helping you to become empowered, to become inspired and motivated to move forward with your creativity and touch base with your creative muse. So I am very excited. I am psyched to do this as a Gen Xer. And, we're running things right now, even though other people think that we're not, but we are. We're running things, especially we're getting that narrative out about how important it is to reinvent ourselves at midlife. And I think we're the first generation, quite frankly, that's really pushing that. So I am bragging on behalf of my Gen X um, brothers and sisters out there. But we know that everyone is, of course, valued. And we hope that you get a lot out of this podcast series. All right. I have a colleague that I've been following. A lot of these people I've met through Instagram, and I love that platform more than any of them because you really get a chance to not only follow people that you like or whatever, but there's a sense of intimacy with some people, and especially when you start a dialogue. And I've been having a dialogue with this lady for a couple of years now, and I can't even remember how I started following her. But because I am very in tune to my spirituality and energy and aura, and because I think that is so connected with creativity. I'm always attracted to people who are able to combine those both. And if you're a fan of Julia Cameron, she talks about these types of things, these combinations, and how really creativity is a form of spirituality. And I do believe that. And if this is woo-woo for you, this might not be the podcast for you, but I encourage you to listen because you may learn something. And me being a woo-woo creativity coach who uses a lot of mindfulness and wellness practices, not only in my own personal art practice and poetry writing, but also with my coaching. I think it's important to understand that there is a connection to the spiritual world, no matter what your faith or your belief system is. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today, and particularly my guest's journey to where she is now. She is a wonderful practitioner. Her name is Wendy Sheridan. And Wendy has a very interesting background, and I think you'll find her quite interesting. She's following a lifelong path of spirituality and creativity, as I mentioned. She sought to use her artistic gifts, and she is a wonderful artist, by the way, visual artist, to help others through graphic design, arts education, and interior design. I didn't even pick up on the arts education because I have a background in arts education too. After a decades-long battle with Lyme disease and autoimmune illness, Wendy became focused on pursuing wellness in body, mind, and spirit. Her journey led her to training in energy healing, meditation, facilitation, and certification to read the Akashic. I always have to remember how to pronounce that word, Akashic Records. This transformative transformational growth drove her desire to unify her creative skills with her interests in healing and spirituality, resulting in the development of Akashic Mandala. And we're going to talk a little bit about what the Akashic Records are, but I wanted to read this quote from her, which I think is going to be quite interesting. She says, knowing that each day I am able to create meaningful personal change in people's lives makes this the most satisfying work I have ever taken on. I have been able to find a way of using the tools and wisdom I have gained in my own journey to help others on theirs. It is immensely gratifying. Welcome, Wendy, to the Spark podcast.
Thank you,
How are
Sharon.
you?
I'm
How are you?
great. It's great to be with you and to connect in a sort of in-person way
Yes, yes.
after only being connected through social media. So
Yes,
thank you
and
for
I
inviting me.
think you are one of the people I've followed the longest, at
Mm,
least on my 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 artistic um, Instagram.
yeah, it's
And I've been very inspired by your work, and I thought it would be a unique contribution to my other side, the creativity coaching side. So
yeah.
welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Well, let's start with this, Wendy. Let's talk about your creative journey, how you ended up coming to this. You had some health challenges.
Hmm.
It seems as if maybe you've always had a creative career and it just sort of changed. Talk a
Yeah.
little bit
Well,
about
I
that.
think you were sort of touching on this before we began, just sort of the way we are called to understand our creative gifts and our spiritual gifts and all of those intersections that they have. And I think that for me, from childhood, I always was drawn to art and creating, drawing. But I also had a real connection to my spiritual life and my spirituality. And so I really feel like I think it's that intuition.
Mm,
And as creatives, we rely on that. And
hmm
in order to have trust in the process of what we're creating. So that's to me the through line with the spirituality, because obviously when you're open to spirit, you're using your intuitive gifts that way too. So
hmm
um, I went to school and I got a design degree.
Okay.
Uh, More focusing on graphic design. My sister is a fine artist, and I don't know if your family was this way, but my mother always seemed to like to put everybody into, well, this is what you do, and this is what you do. And so I didn't feel that that was open for me too, because
Mm,
she's older. She's a fine artist. I'm going to do it this way. So that is the path I chose. But then I came to Chicago and got a design degree, or I'm sorry, I took my design degree and got an art director job in advertising
okay.
and was doing that for a few years and kind of became disenchanted with it and realized, this isn't really aligned with me and it's
hmm
not using my skills to do anything that I really believe in. So sort of took a path of stepping out of it and stepping into my intuitive gifts again more fully. My father passed at that time, and so I was doing a lot of deep grieving and connecting to my spirit through the process of, grieving him at a young age in my 20s,
hmm
23 when he died. And so
Oh, I'm
it
sorry
was
to
a
hear.
big loss to move through and also to leave a career that I thought I was going to be doing. And but then I found my way into working in a nonprofit and that was providing free art education to inner city kids in Chicago that the arts programming was being cut out of the public school system. So
Mhm.
I started leading them in mural projects and teaching and guiding them into college and
Oh,
portfolio work, all sorts of amazing projects I did through that nonprofit work. And and then got married and had my first child, and my husband got transferred to a different city. So we left Chicago, and I left my job that I loved, and then started being an at-home mom, and then had two more children in 4 years. So I kind of moved out of a working in a career way into using my gifts in my home, and focusing on my children and my family. And then as they grew, I was using my creativity in the home, as I said, and began selling antiques. And then that turned into an interior business. And
Okay.
so I always felt like my creativity, I always knew I could rely on it to lead me to whatever the next chapter was going to be. I knew it was there and it wasn't going anywhere. And so it was always, again, that intersection of trusting my intuition and my creativity together to lead me to something that I wanted to manifest with it. And so then I manifested an interior design business with another mother, and we did that. And that was really another great aspect of using my creativity, because I always wanted to help people, which is what I was doing in nonprofit arts education. But this was personal for people in their homes, making their lives better by making their environments work better for them and be beautiful and, fulfilling. And then my health situation sort of was rising up mysteriously, as a lot of autoimmune and Lyme disease can, where it's not diagnosed properly. So that was probably a good 20-year process of trying to get the right diagnosis, having people think I had MS, or, it was really hard because it was affecting my brain, it was affecting my body. And so I obviously had to go through traditional medicine ways to heal, but I also then knew I needed to bring in some other tools to assist that, because there's just not enough knowledge out there, and not enough healing that can happen through a traditional way. So that's when I got into doing more meditation and learning energy healing. And then the final piece was learning how to read the Akashic Records. And that was really interesting, because it sort of gave me a better, I guess we can get into the definition of Akashic Records. Basically,
Actually, that was my next question. You can go
okay.
ahead right now.
Okay. So it is sort of a mysterious sounding thing. And I certainly didn't know what it was. There's the woman that I studied with actually kind of says that word and the records become known to you when you're ready to understand what they are. And I believe that, because I had no familiarity with it. And yet I was led to decide, I think I'll have an Akashic reading. I came into my awareness. And then when I booked with this woman who I ended up studying with, we realized we lived in the same community. And didn't even know that. Yeah. So Linda Howe, and she's written many, many books, and she does a lot of certifications. So if anybody's interested in pursuing this themselves, then, look for Linda Howe and her work. And that's a great resource. So, but basically the Akashic Records, Akashic is like root, the source of all things. And it's a Sanskrit word. And so if you believe in reincarnation, which I obviously do, then you know that we have had many, many, many existences. And so the Akashic Records hold all of that information. And through learning how to access our records, then we can go in and retrieve what is most helpful for us to know. Certainly if that's a lot of information, we don't need to know all of it. It would be overwhelming. So we have guides that help, when we're in the records, deliver to us what is most valuable for us right now, to know, to heal, to be in alignment, to use our gifts the best way for our lives now. So that was really interesting, and I got very excited about learning that. And so she even told me, and I believe this too. At the time, I wasn't sure what to do with it, but she said, you've already been in your records many times. You actually know how to access your records. And I think that that's true for most of us. We do access our records. We're just not aware of it. In dream time, we can access our records. In meditation, we can access our records. It's just learning this process is more intentional. And of course, it allows me to do it for other people. So I acquired those tools. I was doing the interior work. And this other part of me was lighting up a lot brighter and sort of giving me more joy and more curiosity. So I decided to leave what I was doing in the interior design and go into a new interior design.
Awesome. I love that. I love that. I love that.
And it was really difficult because I was working with a woman who I considered my best friend, and it was almost like divorcing her to say, because at the time I didn't know what I was going to do with it. So this is also speaking to your podcast group here.
Yeah.
I didn't know where this was going, but I trusted that what I was feeling was leading me to something more. And that when I thought about the work I was doing, it felt suffocating or limiting, or it didn't feel the way it had felt before. And I knew that I needed to honor that. So I left it and I went into this kind of just open. Didn't know yet what I was going to do with all of these skills that I had acquired. And I also had family challenges at the time. I had 3 children, and 2 of them had developed chronic illness. My son had rheumatoid arthritis. My daughter is still ill with something called POTS and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And then my mother was also declining. I was a lot in the midst. But I still honored this voice inside me. So in the process of leaving the interior business and then continuing to use my tools of meditation, journaling, energy healing, I just stayed open. And I was led by my team of guides to revisit something that I had done when I was working in the nonprofit. I was co-teaching with a woman who was an art therapist, and she did a lot of mandala work because it was a tool that she used with her clients. And so we were doing a class together with our students, and then she even was doing a course privately with some people, and I decided to do it. I had been doing a lot of dream work, and I'm a big fan of Carl Jung, and Carl Jung created mandalas as well.
So, I didn't know that.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
He used it as a tool for his own self-understanding, to understand what his unconscious was wanting to communicate visually. So it was a tool to access that, to create the intention by creating a mandala, to know what was going to come through visually. So I really enjoyed using that as a process for myself to understand myself better back in my 20s. So when I left the interior design business, I was missing my creativity. I was certainly using it at home in different ways, maybe gardening, baking, but it wasn't personal. It wasn't unique to me. It wasn't, I kind of felt a little lost creatively. And I remembered when I studied with Linda Howe, she said, sometimes people go into their records while they read a book to helps enhance their ability to comprehend, or others might go into their records and write and see what comes through, or artists could do it and create. And I thought, oh, well, what would happen if I did go into my records and I created at the same time? And I decided to revisit the idea of the mandala because, as I said, I used it before to see what would come through, and it was effective for me then. Well, when I did it in my records, it was a whole different level of information, and it was energy, and it was a different, it was not just a sort of a psychological state. It was spiritual and it was energetic, and each held, you could feel it when you look at the piece. It was different. And so then I was curious, well, what would come through if I did the same for someone else in their records? And that led me to what I now do. And then the unique twist on it is that I do this also on vintage dictionary paper. And
Yeah.
that was something that my guides led me to as well.
Huh.
Because in addition to the art that is channeled on this dictionary page, there's a word that their guides identify that they want to include in the personal message that's channeled for that person, or whether it be me or whoever I work with. So,
Okay.
yeah, so there's a word that they're specifically telling me to go to, and then I channel the message from them, and then I immediately start creating the art on this page, and that's kind of the unique process. As far as I know, what I was led to do, no one else does, which has been
I've never seen that with
right.
anyone.
And I kind of think that it was a protection thing for me as well. The reason why they chose the dictionary paper, because it can't be replicated by someone else. It's very uniquely mine. There may be somebody else out there. I've seen people trying to emulate what I do. I try not to look too much out there to see who might be copying me now. But this is so clearly mine that I think that's part of why they have me use the dictionary page too, so that it's protected. Plus, it's really, sorry.
There's something interesting too about it being vintage, or because apparently there's, I guess for lack of a better word, there's a spirit still there in a vintage piece of paper. That you're bringing something out from the past, because I mean, the whole process is about your past, the past that you're not conscious of on the day to day. So there's probably something that aids in bringing that out, because you're dealing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I never thought about the fact that that's true too. I do know that people, these particular dictionaries, they had illustrations on the pages too. And sometimes, or quite often, my clients have a connection to the art on the page as well. Yeah, it's really kind of amazing to me too, that like the extra level of synchronicity that comes in.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. I think the other part, and I do want to do a podcast on appropriation of other people's work and copyright law and all that kind of stuff. But I think when you talk about your story and your journey is so unique. It was based on so many different elements that there's no way people really can duplicate it, because it was born from a rather complex, situation, life challenges, life lessons. And unless you have gone down the same path and got the same lessons from it, you can't do it anyway. But that's just on the side thing. Okay. I think you answered number 2.
Yeah. I hope it all held together and made sense.
Yeah, you did a good job. You did good. All right. Well, I'll go to number 3. What advice can you give people over 40 regarding starting and staying creative? You were fortunate, unlike a lot of people, to kind of stay in creative fields, even though they were, different in a lot of different ways, but they still were creative fields. But the one thing that I noticed when you talked about when you left interior design, which, it still was maybe not the same kind of creative like that you're doing now, because this is more freeing to you and it feels more comfortable to you. And by the way, my sister was into interior design solidly until a couple of years ago. She got into yoga. And now she's doing this whole thing, which I think is interesting. She's kind of creating this, fairly new way of looking at your home. So
Mm-hmm.
it's using interior design elements and wellness practices to create a safe and loving environment. So
Perfect.
she kind of created all of that. And
Mm-hmm.
she is getting into a watercolor practice that sort of somehow ties a lot of this together. But anyway, so
Mm-hmm.
I feel
Mm-hmm.
you on that. And I also picked up on the design in the background there, because I was like, not just a
The red
regular.
cloth, yeah.
Yeah, this was like, that's not everybody has that kind of eye. Um, so the one thing I picked up in your story was, particularly once you move past the interior design stuff, was this word of curiosity. It seemed like you kind of followed a sense of curiosity. And I was wondering, what is your thoughts on that for people that may feel a little restricted in doing that?
Well, I think that it's all about permission and
Mm,
realizing that no one else is going to give you permission. You have to give yourself permission. And also moving out of the pressure that we put on everything in our society to be perfect or monetized or compared. It's honoring your unique expression for you and your own self-understanding. And I think I just feel really lucky that all of the ways that I pursued this were for my own healing, my own understanding. And maybe that's what my advice would be, is to start there. What is it that you need to understand? What is it that you need to heal? Is it that you need to express, and to just give yourself permission to do that, whether it's writing, whether it's painting, whether it's clay, whether it's gardening, however, or
mhm,
all of those things, but coming back to you. And I think each time you give yourself permission, then it gives you that much more understanding and information, and becomes less intimidating and
mhm,
more fulfilling. Um, but to just take the pressure off and just let it be playful, and
mhm,
um, remembering the things that you loved when you were little. That's a big
mm,
theme that comes up a lot for a lot of the people that I work with. You know, we move through our lives trying to meet everyone else's expectations. And this is where, coming back to like 40-year-old women checking in with where they are and who they are, this midlife point is the opportunity to then evaluate, what do we want next, and realize at this point, yeah, it's going to come from me. It's not coming from anyone else.
hmm, mhm. I think that you said some key things, but the biggest thing is permission.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't talk about that, but a lot of times, you even alluded to, there were messages somewhere in your life where someone said, "Oh, you are going to be this," or,
Yeah, my
it
mother,
kind
right?
of
Yeah.
moved you,
Mm-hmm.
and it could be a parent, it could be a teacher, it
Mm-hmm.
could be, someone
Mm-hmm.
that, as a younger person, we look up to.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow we decide to put ourselves into, in a way, it's the only word I can think of, it is like a jail. Like,
Yes.
okay, this is what I'm supposed to be according to these people. Maybe because I might have a natural ability with numbers, or I
Mm-hmm.
might have a
Yeah.
natural ability to organize and administer things.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm one of those people too. I have administration gifts. But at the same time, I know that my passion and my joy is my creative side. So sometimes we can't go back to those people
Mm-mm.
that put those messages in our heads. And a
Right.
lot of times they were well-meaning. For me, it was more of my dad, who was more or less like, art school is cool, but you need to make a living. Now, I came out of high school in the late 80s, and that was art, and all that stuff was not, Reagan era,
Mm-hmm.
that was
Mm-hmm.
how life was. And
Right.
we all went into law, or public administration, business administration, law, healthcare, and engineering and all those
Mm-hmm.
types of things. And we're all just discovering that, we spend a lot of money on stuff that really didn't get us. I mean, it might have made us a living, and a lot of us did well. But I think in the long shot, a lot of us are now discovering this is not who we are,
Right.
or who we're becoming is not aligning with what we were told or we were
Mm-hmm.
siloed into.
Yes.
So but it's up to you, not other people, not somebody else, not the person that said all that back in the day. It's up to you to give yourself permission, and that takes a lot of self-reflection. You were able to do that, and to make some self-reflection, but also the curiosity also kind of took over,
Mm-hmm.
and you were like, okay, well, what if we tried this? What if we tried that?
And then I will add that because I have this spirituality component that's entwined with this, I believe that when we are taking these brave steps and we're giving ourselves permission, we're not doing it alone. And that
Yes.
when we're
Yes.
stepping into alignment at a soul level, then the universe is behind that and saying, yes, keep going this direction. This is your direction, not,
Absolutely.
and so we all reach certain points where we're ready to take that new direction and we're ready to step into this new version of us. And so, yeah, we need to give ourselves that permission now, because we need to create a world that gives greater permission, so that we're giving that permission to these young people who are not getting a hand right now, that are not being given some of what we were given. So
Yeah. Yes, definitely. And you know, I think that kind of goes into, you never know what you'll find. Like, you may find that greater purpose. It's sometimes it's beyond just, okay, I'm learning to create now, but it becomes a different mission, just like the work
mm-hmm.
that you're doing. It becomes a purpose that you had no idea 20, 30 years ago was going to be.
If you would have told me 10 years ago, because I've been doing this now for 8 years, 10
Uh-huh.
years ago, I didn't know how to read the Akashic Records. I didn't know any of this. I wouldn't have believed you.
Yeah.
It was so far out of my
Purview. Yeah.
my conception of even myself. But so this is just proof that I kept following one step. I kept keeping things open to and giving myself permission and seeing where it was going to go. And, we're all on a path of healing. We're
Yep.
all on a path of healing. So what is healing? What is healing for me? What is healing for you? It's never wrong to pursue that, because it's going to lead you to alignment and fullness of yourself and your expression in however way you want to bring it in. And that's going to make the collective of us a much healthier place to live.
And God knows we need as
We
many
do.
people that find their pure passion and purpose
Mm-hmm.
right now to help the healing process, not only for ourselves, but for others as well.
Yes.
Uh,
And, coming even back to the woo woo, I was
yeah,
not raised woo woo. And
I
that's
wasn't.
that's a whole other permission piece,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
even being comfortable being seen by my family to do this, I've
yeah.
felt shy about it. Or, I was raised Lutheran, kindergarten
Mhm.
through 8th grade, it was nice to have that as an access point, and it certainly made me a very spiritual person from a very young age. But there was a lot of messaging that unfortunately is embedded in that, and that shame and guilt and that powerlessness, really. And I never agreed with the fact that, I was always curious, well, why are just these few people receiving messaging from
Yeah.
source. I mean, what? That didn't make sense to me.
Right.
So
And
I had
curiosity.
to let myself be open to realizing, no, I can receive messaging. You can receive messaging. We can all do that. We're all
Mhm.
source. We all are guided. We are all that. There's so much eagerness to have that communication. So that's a whole other part of what I do,
Yes.
is just opening that up for people so that they realize that that's
There's
available.
different dimensions. There's different levels of and different systems of belief that may resonate with you more than you think it does.
And it all comes back to permission.
Yep, being open and deciding what resonates with you, what does not. And sometimes you find that what you might have traditionally believed doesn't really align with you, especially when you go older and you've
Mm-hmm.
had so many different experiences and so many different intersections with your spiritual side and with your soul. And and if you're able and you're lucky to be able to bring that into your creative practice, that brings you into another level.
Mm-hmm.
But we could get into that in a whole maybe that's another conversation. So Wendy, how can people find you?
Well, you can go to my website, akashicmandala.com, and they can find me on Instagram and Facebook. I post messages that you have followed for the past 8 years, and
Yeah.
a lot of them are just messages I channel for the collective every day that I have gotten good feedback that they're very helpful for people. Many people have never worked with me, but find that they just rely on that alone. So um, I would welcome anyone that's listening to join us there. And yeah,
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much,
thank you for
Wendy.
having me.
Yeah, this has been a long time coming. I kept saying to myself, I'm going to intersect with her on something. So, I think there's no accidents in the universe, as they
Mm-mm.
say. And so I think there's alignment in different ways. And I just want to thank everyone who's listening or watching this podcast. If you have questions or comments about this episode, if you're on SoundCloud or another podcast player, feel free to, like, subscribe, comment, amen corner. If you have some thoughts on what was said today, and particularly if there was something that was said that may have inspired you to move forward with your own creativity. And that's what I do as a creativity coach. I work with people, particularly at midlife, because it can be a complicated time for a lot of us. And I think now it may be even more challenging than ever because we're the sandwich generation. We're trying to get kids out to college or out in the world. We're dealing with ill parents or relatives. We're dealing with our own the changes in our lives. We're becoming empty nesters, getting ready for retirement. And we want to pursue other things. We're living longer. It's nothing to see that somebody's 100 years old now. It used to be such an anomaly. You remember, it was like all this news about the oldest person in the world. Now we have on Instagram and TikTok, you have 100-year-olds dancing and painting and doing their thing. I mean, you can be a part of that. We can have more than one life in this lifetime as far as what we want to pursue. And I think midlife is the perfect time to do that. You can follow me on Instagram at the SJB is my art Instagram. Spark Your Creative is my creativity Instagram, and I'm there the most. I'm also on Facebook, and I am also on YouTube. I have a YouTube presence, and so we want to encourage you to come and get a chance to meet me there. But anyway, and also sparkyourcreative.com is my home. And I encourage you to contact me if you would like to explore how you can move into and reach your creative dreams. Would love to talk with you and help you make those dreams a reality. Thanks again for listening, and we will see you on the next episode. Take care.